Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Paul. That may not surprise you very much, but finding out or discovering I was an alcoholic literally surprised the hell out of me. I am not up here as a doctor. I leave my degree at home when I come to an AA meeting, and I've worked very hard at doing that for 5 years. I've been very careful to avoid professionalism to the best of my ability. I want to welcome all of you to Alcoholics Anonymous Week in Nebraska. I too think that Kay is much prettier than Keith. Max and I have been just delighted to be here, not only to be able to share your convention weekend with you, but to participate in it. And it's been delightful, and we feel very much at home. Friday night when we got here and walked into the meeting, and the first three patients. You see what I mean? Can't believe a word I say. The first three speakers talked about suicide, and I knew I was in the right place. I know all there is to know about suicide. I spent most of my life trying to figure out how to kill myself. Someday I'm going to write a book on it. A Practical Guide to Suicide, as written by an expert. Curry at the first meeting, Kerry, talking about his bladder trouble. I knew I was in the right place. Nobody ever had as much bladder trouble when they were drinking as I did. And my capacity for AA coffee isn't any better than it was for booze. But my aim has improved tremendously. Back in my home group in Laguna Beach Wednesday night speaker meeting, we always have a show of hands, and I haven't seen that this weekend, and I'd feel more at home. I identified myself as an alcoholic. Could we see the hands of all the other alcoholics in the room? Would you raise your hand, please? Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Can you imagine what we'd look like if we were all drunk at the same time? Then there's always the Al-Anons. Could we see the hands of the Al-Anons? Would you raise your hand? That's beautiful. Yeah, let's give them a hand. They need it. Alcoholics are people who suffer from a disease, an allergy of the body coupled with a compulsion of the mind, such that the first drink leads inevitably to a drunk. It's a disease, and it's called alcoholism. Al-Anons suffer from a disease that's so bizarre, so peculiar, so weird that nobody's even been able to think of a name for it yet. How about newcomers? At our home group, we always ask for the hands of people 30 days or less of sobriety on this program. Could we see the hands of everybody with less than 30 current days of sobriety? Back there. Fine, thank you. welcome you, and I welcome those newcomers who didn't raise their hand. You're my kind of people. If your attention span is as short as mine was when I came here, I better give you the short version of my story. My idea is to read the book, talk to other alcoholics, talk to God, work the steps on a daily basis, and meetings, and don't drink between meetings. And as long as you don't drink between meetings, things have to keep getting better. Or so it seemed for me. I had started to drink. It seemed to me when I first came here, the first thing you're supposed to do is figure out why you drank. And I found out really that the reason I drank was because I'm an alcoholic and I'm supposed to drink. But I got to thinking about why I drank, and the only real reason, a basic reason I drank was because I couldn't sleep. I didn't have a drinking problem, I had a sleeping problem. Actually, I also drank because I was off call and I needed to relax because then later on I was going to be on call. Or I drank because I was on call and I might get a call. Or I was on vacation, and when you're on vacation, I was supposed to work hard at relaxing. And so I always had mostly I drank because it seemed like a good idea at the time. And I knew that I had to get to sleep at night, and nothing worked. Sleeping pills, tranquilizers, nothing helped me get to sleep. The only thing that worked was booze. I didn't call it booze in those days. But I noticed when I was going to pharmacy school, I could go to school all day and then work in the drugstore all evening and then study till 12, 1, 2 o'clock at night and then go to bed. And everything I studied would be running through my mind, and I'd be half awake and half asleep. And in the morning I'd get up and I'd be both tired and stupid. Or I could drink 2 beers and jump in bed, sleep real fast, and wake up smart. And that was the way I went to pharmacy school. And then later on, when I went into graduate school and then medical school and then specialty training and then private practice, I drank more and more. And I thought the reason was that my responsibilities were increasing. If you had my responsibilities, you'd drink too. And if anybody had asked me, I would have told them that that was why I drank more and more. As I recall, I don't recall anybody asking me, but I'm pretty sure it was something like that. And so I drank to get to sleep at night. And I guess it's because of drinking to go to sleep at night that most of the things that I remember about my drinking time are nighttime things. I remember hearing Father Terry back in our area talk last Thanksgiving, and he was saying that in the morning, after he'd been drinking, the night before would have holes in it, where certain parts that he couldn't remember. And I didn't identify with that feeling. I identified with the idea that the night before would have holes in it, and all I could remember was the hole. For instance, in the middle of the night, I'm in the doctor's parking lot at the hospital, and I got 1 foot in the car and 1 foot on the ground, and I don't know which is the lead foot. That was the end of the hole. I don't even know how I solved it. Or hanging up the telephone. I don't have any idea why hanging up the telephone would bring me out of a state of unconsciousness, or a blackout. I didn't know they were blackouts at the time. I had moved the telephone to the far end of the bedroom. I always had a fear of admitting a patient to the hospital in the middle of the night and getting up in the morning and forgetting they were there. And so I had moved the phone to the far end of the room so I'd be sure to be awake. I thought I was a heavy sleeper. An insomniac who was a heavy sleeper. I never didn't think of that at the time. So I moved the phone over there, and here it was in the middle of the night. I had gotten out of bed to answer the phone. I'd gone over there, turned on the light, carried on the conversation with the patient, and I was now hanging up the phone. Well, I didn't know whether I had said, rush to the hospital and I'll be there to meet you, hop in bed, I'll be right out and make a house call, or take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. And when you are a conscientious doctor like I am, you just can't go back to sleep. So I go in and watch old Wallace Beery movies and drink vodka and orange juice because it left you breathless in case they call back. Sometimes I'd have to drink myself back to sleep 2 and 3 times a night. Or finding myself hanging onto the commode bowl, lying on the floor, trying to keep from falling off the floor. And that real comfortable, real cool, ultra smooth feeling of that white, vaguely unsanitary, but comfortable white porcelain on my cheek, And knowing if I didn't keep it there, it would knock my teeth out. But the bewilderment, thinking, my God, Christ, God, what are you doing to me, What's a man in my position doing in this position? Is this the same time I was here as the last time, or is this another time? A lot of times it was the same time. A lot of times it was another time. I don't know how I got there, what I was doing down there, and what God was doing to me. What He was doing to a nice guy like me. Finding myself on a carpeted surface, face down. I'm black. God, it was dark. Paralyzed from the armpits down. Not very well coordinated from the armpits up. And aware of only one thing. So I had a very full bladder. Not knowing where the bathroom was and too proud to ask. I learned very early, don't mumble, where am I? Don't try to get up on your elbows too much, you'll fall over. You make any noise at all, you'll hear this loud voice yelling out, you fell out of bed again. And I think, my God, why was I married to such an idiot? How could I possibly fall out of bed and not know it? How could I be paralyzed and fall out of bed? And she was always saying it. And she was always, I keep telling her, I didn't mind the fact that she was always right. It was the fact that she was so goddamn right. And besides, then she might get up and help me, and I didn't like that either. So the nights weren't very much fun. But I never became a morning drinker. I had a 5 a.m. shut-off time. If it was 1 minute till 5, I would drink myself back to sleep. And if it was 5 o'clock or after, I would just stay up and act like a martyr all day. But sometimes, because of drinking so late at night, through the night, it was hard to get up in the morning. And for a long time, we used to play Al-Anon games about that. I would stay in bed, and she'd come and rip the covers off me, and then she'd come back later and take the pillow, and then she'd sick the dogs on me, and then she'd throw water on me, and finally she'd be screaming, Paul, you got an office, the whole office full of patients, and I'd scream back, screw them, It was hard to get up. I had the flu a lot. And one day I thought to myself, what would I do for a patient that felt this bad? And the answer came right back. I'd give them something to pep them up. And so I started taking things to pep me up. I started out with some appetite appeasers, and they were more socially acceptable. And then I went on to straight amphetamines and then to Benzedrine. And so at times I was even squirting that stuff intravenously. And that worked fine. I never could have gone on drinking and working the way I was if I hadn't had pills to keep me going. And it really got me going in the morning. I got to where I was taking 95 or 90 milligrams of Benzedrine to get out of bed in the morning so I could go and shave. Because I found that closing one eye wasn't doing it anymore. If I wasn't careful, I'd close both eyes and I'd kind of go to sleep with the mirror and burn my face with the electric razor. And so I was taking this to get going and a little more to keep going and a little more to level me off and a little more just in case that was going to start to wear out. And as I say, it worked very well. Except it affected my hearing in that I could no longer listen fast enough to hear what I was saying. I would sometimes draw off of myself and I think, my God, I wonder why I'm saying that again. I've already said it 3 times. In examining patients, they had a table like this and they're sitting looking this way. And with the men, I just have them take everything off but their shorts. And the women, I have them take everything off and they put on a little flimsy plastic thing. It has no sleeves and they put their arms through and it's hanging over. They feel like they have something on, but they don't. I examine their eyes, ears, nose, and throat, and then I take this little plastic thing and I drop it down, preparatory to examine their breast, and I immediately put my right hand over their left breast, and I said, you examine your breast regularly for lumps. And they always used to think, oh my gosh, my last doctor told me to do that, and I used to do it, and I never found anything, and I quit, and I should be doing that, and I read that from the Cancer Society. They have to think of the scientific aspects of the thing, and they're not thinking about some man standing there with his hand on their breast. And it's a real good bedside manner, you know. So I never put my hand on a woman's breast without saying, you examine your breast regularly for lumps. There's one day I'd gone to work, and I had the flu that day, but I'd gone to work anyhow with the aid of a few pills. And I was examining this woman, and she was rather small, and she wasn't very well endowed in that department. And I examined her eyes, ears, nose, and throat, and I took the little plastic thing and I dropped it down. And I put my right hand over her left nubbin. And I looked at her very solicitously, and I said, do you examine your lumps regularly for breast? This program has done a lot for my practice. I got to where I was, I would worry all day about whether I was going to sleep at night. I'd worry all night about whether I was going to sleep at night. And when I got taking all this Benzedrine and got perked up so much, I'd get to feeling a little bit high, and I would take some tranquilizers, but they never did anything for me. And I just took them because you're supposed to. And I get to thinking about how now I never am going to be able to sleep with all this Benzedrine in me. So I start taking sleeping pills to counteract the Benzedrine so that the scotch could put me to sleep. And so at night I would take the sleeping pill. And then sometimes that didn't work fast enough, so I got to taking intravenous barbiturates. I don't know if you have them out here or not, but back there we have, it says oral surgeon pentothal given. By that they mean that's pentothal is the stuff they put in your vein, and they say count to 10, you say 1, and zing, you're asleep. And it's instant blackout is what it is, and I love that stuff. So I used to squirt that stuff in my vein at night to get to sleep. And it was just, instantaneous. But because it was so instantaneous, I couldn't go down to the office, squirt that in my vein, and drive home and go to bed. And I didn't feel like I could lie in bed and have my daughter Polly yell, hey, Ann, come watch Daddy take his nightly fix. So I would keep this in my bag in the car, and the car was in the garage, and thank God the garage was attached to the house, or I'd still be out there somewhere. And I would go out there after working all day and taking pills all day and drinking all evening and then get out there and I'd put this needle in my vein with the barbiturate in it, and I get thinking, how much now do I squirt in? There'll be just enough to counteract the pills and then go again with the scotch, and enough that it'll just put me to sleep, and I can squirt it in, take it out, take turns off, throw it in the bag, throw the bag in the car, slam the door, run in the house and jump in bed so I can fall asleep. And it was hard to judge. If I got too much, it didn't mean anything. It just meant I zinged right under the car. That was no problem. Now I had a greasy black and blue spot. But I had so many black and blue spots that a greasy one didn't matter anymore. But if I didn't get enough, then I would take the tourniquet out and off there and throw it in the bag, throw it in the car, run in the car and jump in bed, and nothing would happen. As Ralph would say, I'd say, oh shit. And it was all or none. I'd either get right to sleep or nothing. And if I didn't get enough, then I'd have to get up and go and get drunk and to go to sleep. And the trouble with that was it didn't last long. And one night I had to put myself to sleep that way 3 times in one night. And I thought, this is kind of dumb. And so I quit doing that. But the only way I was able to quit doing it was to not have it in the house, not have it in the bag, not have it in my possession. That was the only way I was able to get away from pills, narcotics, or booze, was to not have them around. And getting away from pills when you're a doctor is not easy to do. They come as samples, and it seems almost sinful to throw them away. You know? And I wouldn't give them to my best friend, so I didn't intend to take them. As a matter of fact, just a month ago, I got a salesman was in and said, sign it right here, we'll send you some samples. And I said, I didn't want it. And he took the card away, and I was proud of myself. And the next day in the morning, I got a bottle of 50 in the mail. And in fact, they weren't in a bottle, they were in a little package. They were packaged 2 to insert. And I threw them all away except 2, and I put 2 in my pocket thinking that I'd been up for the last 3 nights, busy with practice, and I really needed to sleep. And I thought, well, I'll just have those, and that'll help me go to sleep. And I had those in my pocket. And that day I was going home in the car, and I got to thinking about those 2 pills, and how good it was going to be to go to sleep. And I thought, well, you can't take those pills. And I thought, well, nobody would know, And I thought, well, I can't do anything that I can't stand up here and tell you I did. And so I'm arguing back and forth with myself, and I thought, why don't you just shut up and throw the pills out the window? And I thought, well, I didn't do that. So I didn't talk about it anymore, and I reached in my pocket, and I took the pills and threw them out the car window and went on. I was feeling real proud of myself, and the next day there were 50 more of the damn thing. But they were very cunning, baffling, and powerful for me, pills and booze. But luckily I don't have to do that anymore. Anyhow, one night I had woke up with a real bad bellyache. And I knew I was sick, but I wasn't going to wake up any doctor at that time of the night. So I rolled on the floor and drank scotch to control the pain. And in the morning, I got this doctor friend, and he got me off to the hospital, and I found out I had acute pancreatitis. God, that's embarrassing. Because all these doctors in all these towns around, one town runs into another there, and they all knew that I was in the hospital and had acute pancreatitis. And of course, they all know that pancreatitis is caused by mumps and a few rinky-dink diseases that nobody ever has, or they're caused by gallbladder trouble or chronic drunkenness. God, I'd have given $1,000 for one lousy little gallstone. X-ray came back negative. I thought my mistake was I shouldn't have let him take it. I shouldn't have let him order the X-ray. On 2 occasions, I didn't take anything to get to sleep. It was a weekend, Saturday night, as a matter of fact, and I didn't have to work, and I thought I won't take anything at all to get to sleep. I won't drink or anything. If I don't sleep, to see what happens. And what happened was the next morning I had a convulsion. I was on 2 different occasions that happened. The first time, as we say, Max rushed me off to the hospital, and I had the neurologist come in, and he checked me all over, and he didn't think to ask me if I drank, and I didn't think to tell him. He couldn't figure out why I had convulsions. That's the night I stayed in the hospital, as Max said, except I wouldn't stay unless she stayed with me. I think that's very significant, that the little boy wouldn't stay in the hospital unless his mommy stayed there too. You have to be kind of nutty to do that. You have to be kind of nutty to stay there too, I think. And that's the way we did it. And the second time I had a convulsion, as she said, she just sat on the edge of the bed and watched, and when I was through, she said, you've had a convulsion, you better go to bed. And I fought with her about whether I had or not. But as my muscles got sore and my tongue started to swell and the blood was there from chewing it, I realized maybe she had made the right diagnosis. But I still didn't know what to do about it. And neither did the neurologist that was treating us. And he decided we should go back to the Mayo Clinic, which we did. Prior to that, though, I had gone through a phase where I had tried to quit drinking. I could see that drinking was getting me into trouble. I went through a phase of life where I drank, and it booze did what I needed it to do. It was my friend. But then I went into a phase where I was getting into all kinds of trouble from drinking. And I decided the trouble wasn't worth the good part, and so I decided to quit. And anybody knows the only way to quit is to quit forever and ever and ever. And I quit forever every morning for a long period there. And I couldn't quit. And everything I tried, nothing that I tried worked. And I tried everything I could think of, and I couldn't quit. So I flicked the switch in my brain, and I no longer had a drinking problem. Now I just drank, and it was just a normal thing to do. I didn't try to quit, and I had problems, but drinking wasn't one of them. If you had a wife like mine, you'd drink too. Max and I have been married for 33 years now, and it started out as a good marriage, I'm sure, but it deteriorated as she progressed through the various stages of Al-Anonism. I remember she used to, way back, she used to say, "You don't like me. You don't like me. Why don't you admit it?" And later on she was saying, "You don't love me. You don't love me. Why don't you admit it?" And as her disease was reaching the terminal stages, I heard her screaming at me, "You hate me. You hate me. Why don't you admit you hate me?" And so I admitted it. I remember saying, I think it's the only profound thing I ever said before AA, I remember saying, there's only one person in the world, I don't think I was saying that, I was probably yelling it at her. There's only one person in the world whose guts I hate worse than yours, and that's my own. And she cried a little bit and went off to bed, because that's the only answer she knew to the problem. And I cried a little bit and went and mixed me another drink. And that's the way we were living at that time. And I had tried so hard to help her. I didn't realize at the time that I hated myself so much it had to spill off onto her. And I hated her for the tremendous responsibility of what I was doing to her, and the family I had, and the things that I had created. And I tried so much to help her. I'd sent her to 4 different psychiatrists trying to get me sober. And I had sent my kids to the psychiatrist. Even the dog came home with a psychiatric diagnosis. I remember saying, "Well, what do you mean that idiot says the dog needs more love? All I want to know is, why does he wet in my lap when I'm holding him?" That dog hasn't wet my pants since I joined AA. And neither have I. And that's growth for both of us. I used to read Max positive thinking books. I used to send her to courses, charm school and positive thinking courses. I took 6 courses in hypnosis trying to hypnotize her to straighten her out. The harder I worked on that woman, the thicker she got. In fact, when it ended up at the psycho ward, it didn't really surprise me. But when that steel door slammed shut and she was the one that went home, I was amazed. So this neurologist didn't know why I'd had the convulsions, and I think he wanted to get rid of us, and he suggested that I go back to the Mayo Clinic where he had trained, and he'd write a letter back there and tell him about my case, and he'd have this neurosurgeon take care of me. And I thought to myself, you know, I know more about my case than anybody, and I'm one of the sharpest diagnosticians I happen to know. And so I sat down with me to figure out what was wrong. And, you know, I had these constant headaches. I wouldn't want her to miss a word of this. I made her so nervous she couldn't figure out which buttons to push. I had these headaches, this change of personality, this impending insanity, and, well, I came up with a diagnosis that I had me a brain tumor. and I was going to die, and you'd all be sorry. And so Max packed the clothes, and I packed the booze, and we went off to the Mayo Clinic. And then we spent 9 days going through these tunnels back and forth to these different buildings. You stay in a hotel, a rinky-dink hotel over here, and go through these medical buildings and get all these tests done. And it was right before Christmas of '66, and I noticed that people were going home for the Christmas holidays, and the staff was thinning out, and kind of wondered what they were going to do about my brain tumor right over the Christmas holidays. And I found out. I finally got to see this big brain surgeon, and he says, well, I think before we finish up here, you ought to see our staff psychiatrist. And I thought, well, that was a kind of a funny place to look for a brain tumor, but I thought they looked a lot of other funny places for a brain tumor, too. So I agreed, and I was sorry. I had agreed when he says, I think you ought to go into our locked ward. And that's when that steel door slammed shut, and I knew I was in the wrong place. I was thinking, what's a nice guy like me doing in a place like this? They'd fill me up full of pills so I wouldn't convulse on their nice clean floors. And then they'd say, come on out and mix with the other patients. I didn't want to mix with the other patients. I remember it was right, as I say, before Christmas, and this one night, this woman in white of some capacity came in and dragged me out of my cell, and we were going to ice some Christmas cookies. It took me back to the days of my oldest sister. I have two sisters, one of whom is receiving badly needed psychiatric care, and the other who is not receiving badly needed psychiatric care. And this is the one that wasn't getting any care. We used to make hundreds, it seemed like, of different shapes of Christmas cookies and dozens of color of icing, and we'd have to see who could ice in the best cookie. And this drove me nuts. And here was this woman steering my knife into the icing to smash it onto a cookie. I have no idea how many cookies I crumbled before I told her what she could do with her cookies. Got back to my room, and then I started to work on Max to get me out of there. I knew that if she would assume responsibility for me, I could sign my way out of a place like that. And so that's when the resident, that was the hardest thing about getting out was signing my name. This idiot resident doctor wrote the thing saying that I was leaving against advice and on my own responsibility, and I had to sign my name to it. And that was no problem, except the darn fool watched me. And at this stage, I could no longer write when somebody watched me. If I was writing you a prescription and you looked at me, my hand would stop, be paralyzed, and I'd say, where do you want this prescription filled? I'll call it in for you. Or I'd say, let me see if I have any samples, and I'd go in the other room, and I wouldn't have any samples, and I'd write the prescription and bring it back to him. In fact, it was interesting to me to go back and look at my notes on the various patients and watch the writing deteriorate as the end of 1966, as the end period, began to approach. And then there's a long space where I wasn't writing any notes. And then I came back, and the writing, when I started to write, when I returned, is just terrific. It was very dramatic. In fact, I had to, for medical legal reasons, I had to copy a lot of the notes over. And a lot of the notes I couldn't copy over. I couldn't read my own writing. And I have a file of those at home for my own perusal if I ever need it, and I hope I never need it. And today I just love to write my name with a flourish. I just sprawl it out, and I really enjoy that. If you're new here tonight, just realize after 6 years you're going to enjoy writing your name. It's something to look forward to. But that was, anyway, I got my name signed. I had promised Max I'd never swear again, never take another pill again, never drink again, never do nothing again. And so we got out of there and got on the plane, and we immediately had this big fight over whether or not I was going to drink the free booze. And she won. I didn't drink. But by God, I didn't talk, and I wouldn't eat either. And that was the way we spent Christmas of '66, she and I and our two kids, and coming home. Speaking of the kids, it reminds me of how my feeling at that time was that everything had happened that wasn't the way I had planned it. I thought happened by mistake. I thought that I had married Max by mistake, that I'd become a doctor by mistake. And certainly adopting those two kids was a horrible mistake and a real dirty trick to play on them. I was in the hospital by mistake. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous by mistake. Everything that happened that wasn't the way I planned it, I thought was a mistake. And today I know that nothing happens to me by mistake. Nothing ever has happened to me by mistake. Everything is exactly, and always has been, exactly the way it's supposed to be. And whether I like it or not, whether I planned it or not. And I stay away from the idea of things being a mistake today. I don't accept anything as being a mistake. Anyway, we got on the airplane and got back home, and as Max said, those of you who heard her the other day, and I talked to the psychiatrist there, and he talked to me for 45 minutes and talked to her for 15 minutes, and he called me back in and said, I think you ought to go into our locked ward. And that's how I ended up in the locked ward at our local hospital there. We went there one night, and they wanted to put us in put me, Max didn't have to stay with me that night, put me into a ward bed, because that was the therapy, is to be in a ward. And she knew I wouldn't stay if I didn't get a private room. And she finally took the nurse aside and said, you realize that this man's a member of the staff of this hospital? And I got a private room. It was only private until it moved another patient in, and that turned out to be a drunken judge. I was there a couple of days when that drunken judge was brought in, and that was no good at all. He would lay there and hawk and spit straight up. And I didn't know how straight his spitting was, and it was hard to sleep when you're sharing a room with a drunk like that. The nurse took pity on me and let me take my pillow and go back to the padded cell where I could have privacy. But I was in this mental unit, and it was very boring. The psychiatrist would come in the mornings, and he'd make rounds and see all the other patients and duck out. They wouldn't even see me. And after a few days of that, I caught him by the door as he was going out, and I said, I don't think I need to stay a full week. Like you said, I'm fine now, and I think I ought to get out of here. And he said, I didn't say 1 week, I said 2 weeks. I thought, well, that's strange. And so I went back to doing nothing and figuring out how I was going to get out of that place. And in about 10 days or 12 days or whatever, I don't remember too well, I caught him by the door again, and I said, I don't think I need to stay 2 weeks. My patients are out there literally dying without me, and I got to get out and take care of them, and I don't need to stay 2 weeks. And he said, I didn't say 2 weeks, I said 3 weeks. And I thought, God, I might be dingy, but I'm not dingy enough to go on playing this dumb game. And as I say, it was a very boring place to be. I mean, they wanted me to make leather belts. And I didn't think I had gone to school all those years just to learn how to make leather belts. And besides, I didn't understand the instructions. So I was sitting there one day commiserating with myself about the series of mistakes and misunderstandings that had gotten a nice guy like me in a place like that. When he walked up behind me and he said, how would I like to talk to the man from AA? And I thought, God almighty, I got troubles enough of my own without trying to help him. But I figured he wanted me to learn something that I could use on my patients when I got out. And above all, it looked like it would make him happy if I said yes. And God, I wanted to make that guy happy. And so I said, yeah, I talked to the man from AA. And it seemed like 30 seconds later when this guy comes galloping into the room yelling, my name is Frank and I'm an alcoholic. Ha, ha, ha. And I thought, oh my God. I felt real sorry for him. I thought, that poor slob. The only thing you got in the world to brag about is you're an alcoholic. He forgot to tell me he was an attorney. And he told an interminable story. My God. And he finally got through and he says, well, that's my story. He says, I'm going to a meeting tonight. Would you like to go along? I said, hell no, I won't like it, but I'll go. But I knew he'd go and squeal to that dumb psychiatrist, so I didn't. And he took me to a meeting, I guess. And then the psychiatrist really got interested in me. Every night we'd go into a meeting, and the psychiatrist, now he wanted to know what meeting we went to, what happened, what it was like, what they said, what went on, what meeting we were going through next. And I was the most interesting patient in the ward now. And I thought, my God, I wonder if I've got me an alcoholic psychiatrist. And And so I got real interested in going to these meetings too, and I wanted Frank to get me there every night, and mainly what I wanted to do is to get to where my wife could take me to the meetings, but I wanted to stop off at home and get a few pills and other things and get a haircut. But anyway, I figured if I went to a lot of meetings that make the psychiatrist happy, and Frank, the Friday night was coming up, and Frank wasn't sure he could take me on Friday. Something about maybe having a date with his girlfriend instead of going to a meeting. And I thought, God, that's a funny way to run an organization. And I reported him to the psychiatrist. He suggested maybe I ought to mind my own business. And he got somebody else to take me to the meeting. I know that I don't even know what meetings Frank took me to or how long I went to meetings before I knew I was really at a meeting. But I was still going in and out of awareness. And I remember one night he said something about, well, tonight I think I'll take you down to Laguna Beach because they got, I don't even know what he said they had, but they must have had it because I still go there. And I've heard people give some fantastic pitches on their first meeting. You know, they tell who led and who read and who spoke and what everybody said. And, you know, you really get a spiritual awakening in their first meeting and give a beautiful pitch on it. I don't even know what meetings I went to and how long I went to them, as I said. And the things I heard were dumb. You know, dumb things. You know. Some idiot stood up there and says, for me, to drink is to die. I said, oh, God, how corny can you get? You know, these people are willing to go to any lengths to frighten you into joining this organization. Here I was, I'd had convulsions twice, pancreatitis once, I thought I was dying of a brain tumor, and I was on pass from the nut ward of the hospital, and I thought you were trying to scare me. I remember some big, healthy, husky young fellow stood up there and said, if I don't take a drink today, I'm a success today. And I thought, man, that might be all right for you Skid Row bums, but I got 1,000 things I got to do before I can brag about not taking a drink today. I was still drinking at the time. Yeah. And yet today, that's the most important thing I do. I can recall a day not too many weeks ago that was particularly bad. It started off with an emergency phone call the first thing in the morning, and it was one emergency thing after another. People were really crowding in on me, demanding much more than I could possibly deliver. People just demanding attention, and people having heart attacks without appointments, and you know. And I really began to feel pressured, and I began to panic. And of course, when I do that, my efficiency goes down even worse, and I didn't know how things were going to turn out. And I got the idea, you know, if I could go back in the library and sit down and meditate for a few minutes, all this would clear up. And I'll do that if I ever get a chance. But I never got a chance to go back and sit down and meditate. But I got a hold of the idea that if I don't take a drink today, I'll be a success today. And I put that at the top of the list as the most important thing that I do that day. And I recall that I did go through that day without taking a drink. I don't even recall the specific emergencies and the other problems that had come up, but I do know that I didn't take a drink that day. And when I can put not taking a drink as more important than anything else in that day, when I'm willing to go to any length to stay sober, then staying sober is easy for me. In fact, staying physically sober is the easiest thing I do today. It doesn't even occur to me particularly to take a drink. I distinguish between the compulsion to take a drink, the desire for a drink, and the thought of taking a drink. And I get the thought of taking a drink frequently, I guess. I saw a billboard the other day. I don't know if you have them out here, but riding along I saw a big billboard and it said, Gordon's, the happy vodka. And I thought, damn, I never had any Gordon's. I saw somebody getting served a martini in a restaurant, and it was in a chilled glass with a sweat on the glass, and it looked real good. I thought, gee, that would taste good. And I thought, when were you ever happy with one martini? You know, and I know the only thing one martini would taste like is another martini, and martinis always drove me insane. And I would have to get drunk, and I didn't want to get drunk. So whenever I do think about a drink, I don't think much of it, and it's easy for me to stay physically sober. What is more difficult for me is to stay emotionally sober. It seems to me that as long as I am willing to go to any lengths to stay physically sober, staying physically sober is easy. And one day I had to ask myself, to what length am I willing to go to stay emotionally sober? And I realized I had been willing to go to very little lengths at all. My emotional sobriety seemed to mean nothing to me, had no value. I would give it away. I would throw it away at somebody that passed me on the freeway. Somebody that didn't even know they had it. And when I started to put more value on my emotional sobriety, it became easier for me to maintain it. When I am willing to accept, I found that the answer to my drinking problem was acceptance. I used to pray to God to take away my drinking problem. And I would go back to Mass and Communion, and I'd talk to him about it and explain to him about how I needed sobriety and how humble I was, and I would grovel and tell him how dirty, rotten, awful I was. That was what I thought was humility. And I would tell him how wonderful and great and fantastic he was. I'd flatter God and try to bargain with him to get him to get me sober, and I'd leave it to him, and I'd go home and wait. And while I was waiting, I'd mix me a little drink. And I'd go back the next week, and I would tell him what I was going to do when he got me sober. And I would tell him all these fantastic things I was going to do. I was going to be the world's greatest physician. I was going to discover the cure for high blood pressure, cancer, and a common cold. I'd open a series of free clinics for the peasants down in Mexico. I'd be the Albert Schweitzer of Mexico if he'd just get me sober. And he never accepted the bargain. He never even acted like he heard me. And I thought, there's no use talking to the darn fool. He doesn't even hear me. I couldn't understand a God who couldn't understand a bargain like that. And yet, today I realized that my sobriety came to me when I was willing to just be sober and be anything that God wanted me to be. To be willing to be an alcoholic, to be a drunk, to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and to be at home, right here, right in the middle. Not above any of you, and certainly not below you either, but right in the middle, right at home in an AA meeting, and be whatever God wanted me to be. I remember one morning, again, it started out with an emergency, and I made a decision over the phone. I got dressed and showered and got to the hospital as fast as I could, and on the way there I stopped at the light, and I realized it was early in the morning, and maybe God wasn't awake yet, and I better let him know that I was in trouble. And I started to talk to him about how he asked him for help to keep this woman alive that was in the coronary care unit. And I was going to ask God to help me. And I realized I don't ask God today for anything, no specific. I don't tell him what to do for me or for you or for anybody. But I ask only that he know that I'm there, and to do whatever he wants. I had to be willing to let that patient die if that's what it took for me to be sober that day. And because I was comfortable with the fact she could live or die, and the main thing was that I stay sober, she didn't die. And I get through the day most of the time without trouble when I can remember that the important thing is for me to stay sober and let God's will be done. I had a big hassle one day at the hospital in an emergency room about taking care of a patient that nobody else wanted, and I wasn't supposed to be involved, but I decided if I didn't go ahead and solve the problem right now, it would carry over into my meeting, and I'd get called out of the meeting. So I went to the hospital, to the emergency room, to solve the thing one way or another. As I went to walk in the room, the emergency room door, I realized that I was going to walk into an angry patient, an angry spouse of a patient, an angry nurse, and an angry doctor who had been calling over the phone, and I wondered what I was walking into. And I thought to myself, when I'm wrapped in the protection of these 12 steps in this program, and I'm sober, I can walk in any door, anywhere, anytime, and face anybody, and be unafraid. Because the only way anybody can hurt me is to make me take a drink. And nobody can make me take a drink. So I don't have to be afraid. And I walked in, and that was okay. That was another day that I got by without taking a drink, and I was able to sleep that night. The way I got to where I could sleep at night was to take the third step with it. I turned my will and my life and my sleep over to the care of God. I decided I no longer had any control over whether or not I went to sleep or whether I woke up. That I had to leave that to God. I decided if I died from lack of sleep, it would be God's fault. And I decided I would take nothing, absolutely nothing, to help me get to sleep. I would lie down at an appropriate time. I'd have books, the 12s and 12, and the big book, and the grapevines by the head of the bed, so that if I was awake, I'd have something to read. But if I slept, because I was supposed to sleep, and if I was awake, it's because I was supposed to be awake. One night I awakened, and I started taking my arm out from under the pillow to see what time it was. And I stopped because I realized I no longer watched the time during the night to see how much sleep I was getting. And in the morning I wondered why I had even wondered what time it was. I obviously didn't have an appointment with anybody, and I wasn't going anywhere. And I realized the only reason I wanted to know what time it was is so I'd know how tired to be the next day. I find that acceptance is the key to life for me, and the key to happiness. If I'm unhappy, it's because there's some person, place, or situation that I find unacceptable to me. And it's a fact of my life. It isn't waiting for for me to like it or for me to be willing to have it be that way in order to be that way. That's the way it is. And it's up to me to accept it as that's the way it is. And then I can choose whatever attitude I want to have toward the thing. I have a choice of attitude today. A choice of whether I'm optimistic or pessimistic, whether I'm happy or sad, whether I'm happy that I'm sober or sad that I can't drink. I have a choice of attitude all day long, every day. My relationship with Max is different than it was when I was drinking. I remember one night I went to a men's stag, and I drove down to Laguna Beach. It takes about 35 minutes to get there, and I drove down real fast, the radio playing real loud, and I felt fine. Went to this meeting, and an old-timer was talking, and he said a lot of real dumb things. And I thought, but I'm so tolerant, it didn't bother me at all, you know? And then a newer fellow was talking, and he said a lot of dumb things. And again, I thought, you know, with all the tolerance I have, that doesn't bother me. Let it live and let live and all that stuff. And I thought how wonderful my tolerance was. And the meeting was fine. And I got in the car and I drove home. And I drove real fast and the radio was playing loud and I thought everything was beautiful. And I walked in the house and Max said something about that Ann had said something and she jumped all over and sent her to bed. And I got furious. Max knows nothing about how to be a mother. And I didn't know why she had so much trouble with it, because I told her everything I knew about the subject. And I got furious and I was screaming at her, thinking, I told you 1,000,000 times not to do so and so. You're driving me crazy. And I realized she had driven me crazy. She had driven me to drink. She had driven me in the nut house. And I didn't like being drunk, and I didn't like being in the nut house. And I had to figure out how I could keep her from driving me back there again. And I had to spend a lot of time working on that problem. It's been a very slow process. I remember in my third year, I was running around telling people the Serenity Prayer. It says, I've accepted all the things I'm supposed to accept. Now it's time to change the things I'm supposed to change. I got to get rid of this woman. And they didn't accept it that way. I came to realize that the less I demanded of her, the less she was demanding of me. That when I got off her back, she was off my back. I found that the more I was trying to control another person, the more I was under that person's control. That when I insisted another person do a certain thing, then what I do next depends on whether they do or don't do what I'm trying to get them to do. And it was hard for me to get off her back and let her be herself. To love her for who she was, not for who I wanted her to be. I had to learn how to work the steps in my own home. I had found it easy to come to meetings and to be kind and loving to the newcomer. You taught me that. And I found it was easy to love all alcoholics. and then to love the people out there. And I found the hardest place to practice this program was in my own home. And I had to take for each of the steps in relation to my own home. That I was powerless over alcohol, the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. And that my life in my home was unmanageable by me, even though I was the Lord and master of the house. That I had to ask God to restore me to sane thinking in my own home. I had to turn my will and my life and my wife over to the care of God. I had to take a fourth step in relationship to Max in the home, and the fifth step, and I had to make amends. And particularly in the 12th step, I had to treat Max like another alcoholic, a sick Al-Anon. That's an endearing term when I use it, a sick Al-Anon. And when I treated her like another alcoholic, things started getting better. So our relationship is a lot different today than it was. And we try to tell each other what we feel rather than what we think. When she tells me what she thinks, I can fight with her and argue with her. I remember a time she'd bought a bunch of furniture, and I didn't like it and it didn't fit in the room. It was supposed to be my den. It got on sale, and we were arguing about sending it back, and I kept telling her to call the store, and she kept telling me I should call. And we were arguing about why I thought it was her job, and she was telling me why she thought it was mine, until we were getting into a rather heated argument, and finally she said she was afraid. She was afraid to call. And my immediate reaction was, well, that SOB can't do that to you. Where's the phone? And when we talk feelings instead of ideas, we get along a lot better. And I understand myself better when I'm doing that. My relationship with God is entirely different than it was. I never sit and think whether I should go this way or that way and wait for God to come down from on top of a mountain and tell me which way to go. I think He expects me to keep moving. He's too busy to keep coming and giving me the orders for the day, and I'm too busy to sit around waiting. So we both keep moving. There's a lot to be done, and I just do whatever's in front of me. And whatever I do the thing, try to do it for the right motive, and leave the result up to God. And if my motive is right and I leave the results up to God, then that's obviously God's will for me. And that's the way I try to be comfortable each day. So I go by a kind of a AAA program. A for action. There's a lot of action, a lot of things to be done, a lot of AA involvement. The A for acceptance, accepting everything that happens as that's the way it's supposed to be. And the A of attitude. I am responsible for my attitude, for doing things for feeling the way I'm supposed to at every particular moment. As far as I can determine, God Himself doesn't determine my attitude. That's entirely up to me. That's one of the choices you gave me when you gave me sobriety. And I have a very comfortable relationship with God today. He and I are good friends. He rides to work with me every morning. One of the first things I learned in AA was don't turn on the radio. I never turn on the car radio, and God and I talk at that time. Seems like I do most of the talking, and I talk out loud. And I let Him know what my problems are, and generally I say, okay, God, here we go again. Another day, another dollar. Let's have the same contract as yesterday. I'll keep stirring things up, and I'll keep active, and you make things turn out exactly the way they're supposed to be. And whatever happens, that's the way I'll accept it. That's the way it's supposed to be for me that day. I try to go through the day without wishing a single person that I run into would change in any way. I found out that I had used up my right to be unhappy at Max's expense. And so I no longer ask her to change. And I've tried to carry that over to other people and have nobody change. Everybody's supposed to be exactly the way they are today. Nobody needs to change just to make me comfortable, make me feel better. I have to accept it as it is today and have the right attitude. It gets more comfortable all the time. As I say, my relationship with God is different in that I no longer look for God up there. I didn't even find God in church when I was going there toward the end, because I wasn't taking Him in with me in my heart. Today I feel that God is in here, and He's in you. He's in each of us. It seems very obvious to me He's in this room, and in any AA meeting anywhere over the world. And He's in all people. And I've been concentrating on trying to see Him there, trying to communicate with the God in each one of the people I run into, and try to see the good instead of the bad. And I end up more comfortable that way. It's really been a great way for me to go. This is the best life I've ever known. I used to think that the worst possible thing that could ever happen to me would be that I'd turn out to be an alcoholic. And it turned out to be the best thing that's ever happened to me. Which proves to me I don't know what's good for me. If I don't know what's good for me, I don't know what's good for you. And so I just accept things as they are. And try not to give so much advice. I'm not very successful at that. But I'm getting more comfortable all the time. It's a few minutes till 3. I'm used to having a quitting time and stopping 5 minutes before the end of the hour, so there's time for the collection. I think the seventh tradition is more important than anything I might say at any podium anyhow. Because, especially if you're new here, I think you should be aware of the fact that, well, for instance, the alcoholics that raised their hands here, every one of them, every alcoholic that's in this room sober is not out there in some jail cell or a hospital bed or on the highway killing themselves or somebody else. In fact, every Al-Anon that's in here is not out there in some home screaming at their kids. They're doing the things that Al-Anons do. And they're all in here, safe, sane, and sober, instead of out there where alcoholics and Al-Anons normally belong. And I'm very impressed with the fact that costs the American taxpayer absolutely nothing. I'm very pleased and very proud of the fact that you have to be an alcoholic in order to contribute to Alcoholics Anonymous. That we not only don't solicit money from non-alcoholics, we won't even accept money from them. That we are self-supporting through our own contributions. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't tell you that I'm proud to be an alcoholic, but God knows I'm not ashamed of it either. I'm an alcoholic because I have that disease. It's a disease I was smitten with. And I don't need to be ashamed because I have it. But I'm very pleased to be a sober member of Alcoholics, and I'm glad that I'm an alcoholic. It's the best life I've ever known. And I'm not only glad to be here and be on this program, I'm glad I'm an alcoholic. And if you're not glad and you don't understand that, I hope you become glad too, especially if you're relatively new, or if you're not new. This being an alcoholic is the best life I've ever known, as I say. As a matter of fact, being an alcoholic is such a good idea. Frankly, I'm amazed I didn't think of it myself. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. Pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.